This is my farm, bought at a blind auction, without any inspection. I have no idea what condition it's in or what's waiting for me there. It used to be a huge agricultural enterprise. Now, it might be a ruin. Can I bring it back to life and make it profitable again? If that sounds interesting to you, leave a like and let's get started. This is second part of this story. First part you can watch clicking to link in description. First thing this morning, I walked out to inspect the fields after last year's harvest. I wanted to see what condition they were in before planning my next move. The third field, the grass field, looks absolutely perfect. The grass is still green and growing beautifully, thick and healthy. That field doesn't need any work right now. I'll let it keep growing and harvest it when the time comes. But the first two fields, the ones where I planted wheat last year, those are a completely different story. As I walked across them, I could immediately see the problems. The soil is rock hard, compacted from the weight of the combine harvester driving over it during harvest. In some areas, the ground is so packed down that I can barely push my boot into it. There's also leftover wheat stubble sticking up through the soil, short, dry stalks that weren't completely cut during harvest. And across both fields, I can see hard, crusty patches where the soil has dried out and cracked. This is exactly what happens after a harvest. The equipment compacts the ground, and without proper preparation, you can't plant new crops. The seeds would never germinate in this hard soil, and the roots couldn't push through. So before I can plant anything new, both wheat fields need thorough cultivation. No shortcuts this time, I need to do it right. I walk back to the equipment shed and grab my working cultivator, the same one I used last year. It's old and a bit worn, but it still does the job. I hitched it to the tractor, checked the connections, and drove out to the first wheat field. Time to break up this hard ground and get it ready for planting. I started at the edge of the field and began working my way across in straight, even lines. The cultivator blades dug deep into the compacted soil, breaking it apart and turning it over. The old wheat stubble got churned into the ground, mixing with the dirt. Dust rose up behind me as the tractor pulled the cultivator forward. The work was slow and loud, the tractor engine groaned under the load, and I had to keep my speed steady to avoid bogging down. Why is cultivation so important? Let me explain. Cultivation breaks up compacted soil, which allows air and water to penetrate deep into the ground. It removes old crop residue like that wheat stubble, preventing diseases and pests from carrying over to the next season. It also creates a loose, soft seedbed perfect for new seeds to germinate and for young roots to grow strong. Without cultivation, the new crop would struggle and the harvest would be terrible. So this step is absolutely essential. Row by row, pass by pass, the first field slowly transformed. The hard, crusty surface became loose, dark, workable soil. My arms ached from steering, and the tractor was covered in thick dust, but the progress was satisfying. Both wheat fields were now fully cultivated and prepared for planting. I parked the tractor and cultivator back in the shed, wiped the sweat off my face, and smiled. Phase 1 complete. Now came the big decision: what crop should I plant this year? Last year I planted wheat and it did okay, decent profit, no major problems. But this year, I want something more profitable, something that will bring in serious money. So I did my research, talked to other farmers, checked market prices, and came to a conclusion: canola. Canola is one of the most profitable crops. It sells for higher prices than wheat, and the yield per field is excellent. I jumped into my pickup truck and drove to the agricultural supply store in town, the same place where I bought wheat seeds last year. I walked inside, found the seed section, and grabbed a bag of canola seeds enough to plant both fields completely. The clerk rang it up, and the total came to $800. Yeah, definitely more expensive than wheat seeds. But like I said, it's an investment. I loaded the heavy seed bags into the back of the pickup, secured them with straps, and drove back to the farm. Time to plant. But wait, there's a problem. I don't own a seeder, remember? Last year, I rented one from the equipment company, and I'll have to do the same thing again this year. Not ideal, I hate spending money on rentals, but buying my own seeder is still too expensive right now. Maybe next year. The rental cost would be $500 for 3 days. Fair enough, I agreed. I drove my tractor into town to the rental company. They had the seeder waiting for me out front. It was a solid, well-maintained machine, not brand new, but in great condition. Much better than the junk equipment I've been dealing with. I hitched the seeder to my tractor, signed the rental paperwork, paid the fee, and started the slow drive back to the farm. The seeder was heavy and the tractor had to work hard pulling it, but we made it home without any problems. Unloaded the canola seed bags from the pickup truck and got ready to plant. Now here's something important: canola seeds are much smaller than wheat seeds. That means the seeder settings need to be adjusted. If I leave it set for wheat, the seeds will pour out too fast, and it'll run out halfway through the field. So I carefully adjusted the seed distribution rate, making sure it matched the smaller canola seed size. I filled the seeder hopper with the first batch of seeds, double-checked everything, and drove out to the first cultivated field. I positioned the tractor at the edge of the field, engaged the seeder, and started moving forward. The seeder worked beautifully, dropping tiny canola seeds at perfectly spaced intervals and covering them with a thin layer of soil as I drove. I made careful, straight passes across the field, watching to make sure there were no gaps or overlaps. The rows came out clean and even. This felt good, productive, efficient, professional. After about a half hour, the first field was completely planted. I refilled the seeder with more canola seeds and moved immediately to the second field. Same process, same careful attention to detail. Another hour and a half later, both fields were planted. I stood at the edge of the second field, looking out at the freshly seeded ground, and felt a wave of satisfaction. 2 full fields of canola, one of the most profitable crops, planted and ready to grow. I drove the tractor back to the rental company and returned the seeder. The clerk thanked me and said to call anytime I needed equipment again. I hopped back in my tractor and headed home. Now all I can do is wait for the canola to grow, and while I'm waiting, I have plenty of other work to do on this farm. Now, with both canola fields planted and growing, I had time to think about the bigger picture. Last year, collecting grass was one of the worst jobs I did. Remember? I had to use a pitchfork and shovel, loading grass into the trailer by hand. My back was killing me, and it took forever. This year, I want to do things properly. No more manual labor if I can avoid it. I need proper grass harvesting equipment. So I started researching what equipment I actually need. After talking to other farmers and looking online, I figured out the perfect setup: a windrower and a forage trailer. The windrower gathers cut grass into tight, organized rows called swaths. Then the forage trailer drives over those swaths and automatically collects the grass, loading it into the trailer without any handwork. This is how professionals do it. No more shoveling. The problem? Both pieces of equipment are expensive. But I checked online classifieds and found a local farmer selling both together. He's upgrading to newer equipment and wants to get rid of his old stuff quickly. I contacted him immediately and asked about the price. He said he'd sell the windrower and forage trailer together for $11,000. That's a huge chunk of money. But I thought about how much time and pain it would save me. I drove to his farm the next morning. He was waiting for me with both machines already parked outside. The windrower looked solid. The tines were a bit worn, but still functional. The drive system worked smoothly when he demonstrated it. The forage trailer was bigger than I expected. It had a massive loading mechanism on the front and a huge storage compartment. He showed me how the pickup system works. It grabs grass from the ground and throws it up into the trailer automatically. I was impressed. We agreed on the price and I paid him $11,000. Then came the challenge, getting both machines back to my farm. The windrower was easy. I hitched it to my tractor and pulled it home slowly. But the forage trailer was heavier and more awkward. I had to drive carefully, taking corners wide and avoiding bumps. I parked them near the equipment shed, feeling proud. This was a serious upgrade. My grass operation was about to get way more efficient. Now let's talk about the grass field. Remember, I planted grass in the third field last year, and it's been growing steadily ever since. By now it's incredibly tall, waist high and thick, perfect for harvest. This will be the first real test of my new equipment. I started by grabbing the same mower I've been using all along. I hitched it to my tractor and drove out to the grass field. I lowered the mower and began cutting. The grass fell in neat rows behind me, just like before. The smell of fresh cut grass filled the air. It's one of my favorite parts of farming. After about an hour and a half of steady work, the entire field was mowed. Rows of cut grass stretched across the field, waiting to be collected. Now for the exciting part, testing the windrower. I drove back to the shed, detached the mower, and hooked up the windrower. I'd never used one before, so I was a little nervous. I drove back to the field and positioned myself at the edge of the cut grass. I engaged the windrower and started moving forward. Immediately, I could see it working. The tine spun, grabbed the loose grass from the rows, and formed it into tight, thick swaths. The difference was incredible. Instead of loose, scattered grass, I now had organized lines of compacted grass, perfect for collection. I worked my way across the entire field, gathering every row into neat swaths. This took about another hour, but watching the windrower work was mesmerizing. Finally, the moment I'd been waiting for, using the forage trailer. I drove back to the shed, detached the windrower, and hooked up the forage trailer. This thing was heavy. My tractor had to work hard just to move it. I drove back to the field and lined up with the first swath of grass. I engaged the pickup mechanism and started driving forward. The sound was loud, a roaring crunching noise as the trailer grabbed grass from the ground. But it was working. Grass poured into the trailer at an incredible speed. I just had to drive straight and steer. The machine did all the hard work. Within few minutes, the trailer was completely full. I couldn't believe how fast it was compared to shoveling by hand. Last year, it took me hours to fill a trailer. This year, 10 minutes. I drove the full trailer back to the farm, grinning the whole way. This equipment was worth every penny. Now, here's where I decided to try something different. Last year, I sold grass directly to the biogas plant. This year, I want to make silage instead. Why? Because silage is more valuable than regular grass. When grass ferments into silage, it becomes energy-dense feed that buyers pay premium prices for. Plus, I can store silage and sell it whenever I want, unlike fresh grass which needs to be sold immediately. But for this, I need silage pit. So first, I removed 2 manure heaps. Then I bought 2 pits. This cost $5,000 for me. I backed the forage trailer up to the first silo pit and pressed the unload button. Grass poured out of the trailer into the pit, forming a big green pile. I spread it out evenly with a shovel, making sure it covered the entire pit floor. Once the trailer was empty, I drove back to the field to collect more grass. After several trips back, the first silo pit was nearly full. Now came the most important part, compaction. For silage to ferment properly, the grass must be compacted tightly. This removes air pockets and releases plant juices, which kickstart the fermentation process. Without proper compaction, the silage will rot instead of fermenting. So I drove my tractor directly into the silo pit and started driving back and forth over the grass. The tractor's weight pressed down on the grass, squeezing it tighter and tighter. I drove in different patterns, straight lines, circles, diagonals, to ensure every part of the pile was compacted evenly. Once the first pit was compacted, I grabbed a large tarp and covered the entire pile. The tarp seals the silage from air, which is essential. Without oxygen, the grass will ferment anaerobically, turning into high-quality silage. The sun will heat the tarp, accelerating the fermentation process. Then I repeated the entire process with the second silo pit. More trips to the field, more grass collection, more compaction, and another tarp. By the time I finished, both silo pits were completely full and covered. The grass field was empty again, ready to regrow for the next harvest. And now, all I had to do was wait. The silage would take several weeks to ferment fully, but once it was ready, it would be worth a lot of money. While the silage was fermenting in those covered pits, I turned my attention back to the sheep. I walked over to the sheep pen and immediately saw something exciting: wool pallets. Several pallets of fresh wool were sitting in the collection area, ready to be sold. I counted them. 6 pallets total. That's more than I collected last time, which means my sheep flock is healthy and productive. Their wool is growing thick and full, exactly what I want to see. The sheep themselves looked great too. Well-fed, active, moving around the pen happily. The grass bales I stored in the barn loft are keeping them fed perfectly. Now I needed to transport the wool to sell it. I grabbed my tractor and attached the front loader with pallet forks. I carefully picked up each wool pallet one by one and loaded them onto my flatbed trailer. The pallets are heavy. Each one is packed with dense, fluffy wool. Once all 6 pallets were secured on the trailer, I jumped into my tractor and headed to the spinning mill in town. The spinning mill is where they buy raw wool and process it into fabric. It's the best place to sell wool because they pay fair prices and always need more supply. I backed the trailer up to their loading dock, and the workers came out to unload the pallets. They inspected the wool quality, nodded approvingly, and processed my payment. For 6 pallets of wool, I received almost $14,000. That's fantastic income for basically doing nothing except feeding the sheep occasionally. The sheep continue to be one of my best investments on this farm. With money from the wool sale in my pocket, I decided it was time to earn some extra income while waiting for the canola to grow. Contract work. Remember, I can take jobs from other farmers who need help with their fields. I checked the contract board online and found 2 good opportunities. Both were cultivating jobs. The first contract was for a medium-sized field about 2 miles from my farm. The farmer needed it cultivated before planting season. The pay was $7,000. Decent money for a few hours of work. I accepted the contract, hooked my cultivator to the tractor, and drove to the location. When I arrived, I could see the field was covered in old crop residue. Dried stalks and weeds everywhere. This would take some time, but nothing I couldn't handle. I started at the edge and began working my way across in straight, careful passes. The cultivator blades dug deep, churning up the old residue and breaking apart the compacted soil. Dust billowed up behind me as I worked. The tractor engine hummed steadily, pulling the cultivator without any problems. Row by row, the field transformed. Hard, messy ground became loose, workable soil. After about 1.5 hours of steady work, the entire field was cultivated. I drove around the perimeter one last time, checking for any spots I might have missed. Everything looked perfect. Complete coverage, even depth, no gaps. The payment of $7,000 was transferred to my account immediately. First contract complete. I didn't waste any time. The second cultivating contract was for another field just a few miles away. This farmer also needed his field prepared for planting. The pay was $5,000. I drove straight there with my tractor and cultivator still attached. I got to work immediately. Done. Another $5,000 in my account. 2 contracts completed in one day. That's solid extra income without planting anything on my own farm. But I wasn't done yet. I found one more contract available. This one was for mowing grass on a large field. The pay was $10,000 because the field was huge. I accepted it immediately. I drove back to my farm, detached the cultivator, and attached my mower instead. Then I headed to the contract location. When I arrived, my jaw dropped. This field was massive, easily 2 times the size of my own grass field. Tall, thick grass covered every inch. This was going to take a while, but the pay was worth it. I positioned my tractor at the edge, engaged the mower, and started cutting. The mower worked beautifully. My newer mower cuts so much better than the old one I used to have. The blades sliced through the grass cleanly, leaving neat rows behind me. I worked for over 2 hours, making pass after pass across the enormous field. By the time I reached the final corner of the field, my arms were tired from steering, but I felt great. The entire field was perfectly mowed, with clean rows of cut grass ready for the farmer to collect. The farmer paid me $10,000. He was thrilled with how quickly and cleanly I completed the job. He even said he'd call me again next time he needed work done. 3 contracts completed in one day, cultivating 2 fields and mowing 1 huge field. The total earnings were $22,000, which is a massive boost to my farm income. Now, with all that contract work finished and money in the bank, it was time to prepare for the upcoming canola harvest. The canola fields were starting to turn golden yellow. They'd be ready to harvest in a few weeks. That meant I needed to make sure the combine harvester was in perfect working condition. I didn't want any breakdowns mid-harvest like last year. I walked over to where the combine was parked and climbed into the cab. Time for a test run. I turned the key and the engine coughed to life. So far, so good. I engaged the hydraulic system to test the header lift and immediately noticed a problem. Hydraulic fluid was leaking from underneath the machine. I could see it dripping onto the ground, forming a small puddle. That's not good at all. I shut down the engine immediately and climbed out to investigate. I got down on my hands and knees and crawled underneath the combine to see where the leak was coming from. What I found made my heart sing. One of the main header lift cylinders had a blown seal. Hydraulic fluid was pouring out of it. If I tried to harvest with a leaking hydraulic cylinder, the header wouldn't lift properly, and I'd lose all my hydraulic fluid mid-field. Both issues had to be fixed before harvest, or I'd be stuck with a broken machine and ripe crops rotting in the field. I grabbed my phone and searched online for replacement parts. I found a supplier that carried the exact hydraulic seals I needed. I ordered both parts immediately. The total cost was $2,000. Not cheap, but absolutely necessary. The supplier said the parts would arrive in one day. While waiting for the parts, I got to work preparing for the repair. I drained all the old hydraulic fluid from the system into collection buckets. No point leaving contaminated fluid in there. I cleaned the leaking cylinder carefully, removing all the old grease, dirt, and residue. I wanted a clean work area so the new seal would install properly. When parts arrived, I opened the boxes and inspected everything. The hydraulic seal kit looked perfect. Time to get to work. I started with the hydraulic cylinder repair. I carefully removed the old blown seal and cleaned the cylinder shaft thoroughly. Then I installed the new seal, making sure it seated perfectly in the groove. I applied fresh hydraulic grease around the seal to help it slide smoothly. After installing both parts, I refilled the hydraulic system with fresh hydraulic fluid. I started the combine engine and tested everything multiple times. The header raised and lowered smoothly. No leaks. I ran the combine for 20 minutes straight, testing every function. Everything worked flawlessly. The combine was ready for harvest. With the combine repaired and ready, I turned my attention to another piece of equipment that needed upgrading: my mower. The old mower I repaired back in year 1 has served me well, but it's starting to show its age. The blades are getting dull and don't cut as cleanly as they used to. The mounting brackets are bending from all the stress. And honestly, after using it for over a year, I can feel it struggling with heavy grass. It's time for an upgrade. I searched online classifieds and found a newer, more powerful mower for sale. It was a few years old, but in much better condition than my current one. The blades were sharp, the frame was solid, and it had a wider cutting width, which meant I could mow fields faster. The price was $5,000. Definitely an investment, but worth it for the efficiency gain. I contacted the seller and drove out to inspect it. When I saw it, I was impressed. This mower was built tough. Heavier construction, better bearings, reinforced cutting deck. I paid him $5,000. I hitched the new mower to my tractor and hauled it back to the farm. Now I had a newer, better mower ready for heavy-duty grass cutting. Speaking of grass, remember that grass field? It had grown back fast after the first harvest. The grass was tall again, thick, and ready for another cutting. But this time, instead of making silage, I wanted to create grass bales. Why? Because bales are easier to store and handle, and I can feed them directly to my sheep throughout the winter. With my growing sheep flock, I'll need a lot of feed. I hitched my new mower to the tractor and drove out to the grass field. Time to test this new equipment. I engaged the mower and started cutting. Wow. The difference was immediately noticeable. The new mower cut through the grass like butter. It was faster, cleaner, and required less power from the tractor. The wider cutting width meant each pass covered more ground. What used to take me an hour and a half with the old mower now took just over an hour with the new one. I was thrilled with this upgrade. After mowing the entire field, I had neat rows of cut grass covering the ground. Now I needed to turn this grass into bales. But I don't own a baler. Those machines are expensive, and I only need one occasionally. So just like with the seeder, I decided to rent one. I called the equipment rental company and asked about balers. They had a rectangular baler available. It creates compact, stackable bales perfect for storage. The rental cost was $600 for 3 days. I agreed and went to them for baler. The baler was bigger and more complex than I expected. The rental company worker showed me how to operate it, how to engage the pickup mechanism, how to adjust bale density, and how to tie the twine properly. Then I drove to the grass field. First, I needed to use the windrower to gather the cut grass into proper swaths. I made several passes with the windrower, organizing all the loose grass into tight, neat rows. Then I switched to the baler. I positioned it at the beginning of a swath, engaged the pickup mechanism, and started driving forward. The baler roared to life, grabbing grass from the ground, compressing it into a tight rectangular shape, and tying it with twine. Every few seconds, a finished bale dropped out the back. It was mesmerizing to watch. I worked my way across the entire field, creating bale after bale. The tractor pulled the heavy baler without problems, and the machine never jammed or malfunctioned. By the time I finished, the field was dotted with dozens of rectangular grass bales. I counted them, 28 bales total. That's a lot of feed for the sheep. But now I had a new problem. How do I transport these bales? My regular trailers aren't ideal for hauling bales. The bales can roll around, shift during transport, and potentially fall off on bumpy roads. I needed something better. So I decided to buy a flatbed trailer specifically designed for cargo like bales and pallets. I drove to the trailer dealership in town and explained what I needed. The salesman showed me a simple, sturdy flatbed trailer with tie-down points and a flat surface perfect for stacking bales. It wasn't fancy, but it was exactly what I needed. The price was $7,000, reasonable for a quality trailer that would last for years. I bought it on the spot, hitched it to my pickup truck, and drove it back to the farm. Now it was time to collect all those bales and bring them home. I drove the tractor with the front loader and pallet forks out to the grass field. I positioned the spike, drove forward into a bale, and lifted it. Perfect. The bale hung securely on the spike. Then I unloaded onto trailer and drove to the sheep barn. All that's left is to fold them inside so they don't get wet in the rain and are well preserved. With the bales safely stored, I returned the rented baler to the equipment company. That job was done. Now it was time to check on the silage I made weeks ago. I walked over to the silo pits and carefully lifted one corner of the tarp covering the first pit. The smell hit me immediately. A strong, fermented, slightly sour smell. That's exactly what properly fermented silage should smell like. I pulled back more of the tarp and looked at the silage. It had transformed completely. The bright green grass was now dark, almost black-green. It was compact, dense, and moist from fermentation. Perfect silage. I removed the tarp completely and attached my forage trailer to the tractor. Time to load this silage and sell it. I drove the trailer into the pit and started loading. The silage was heavy and packed tight, much denser than fresh grass. I filled the trailer completely, compacting it as much as possible. Now, where to sell it? The biogas plant. They pay premium prices for silage because fermented material produces more energy than fresh grass. I drove to the biogas plant on the edge of town and backed up to their receiving area. I unloaded the entire trailer, and he processed my payment immediately. For that first load of silage, I earned $2,500. That's significantly more than I would have earned selling the same amount as fresh grass. The fermentation process added real value. I was so excited that I immediately drove back to the farm and loaded another trailer. Then another. I made multiple trips throughout the day, hauling silage from both silo pits to the biogas plant. Each trip brought in $2,500. By afternoon, I had completely emptied both silo pits. Every last bit of fermented silage was sold. I calculated the total earnings, almost $25,000. That's an incredible profit, especially considering the grass grew on my own field essentially for free. The only costs were fuel and equipment time. This silage operation proved to be one of my best decisions. Between the efficient grass collection with the windrower and forage trailer, the proper fermentation process, and the premium prices at the biogas plant, I created a highly profitable income stream. With all the silage sold and money in the bank, summer had finally arrived. The canola fields were now fully mature, transformed from green to brilliant golden yellow. The entire fields glowed in the sunlight, ready for harvest. This was the moment I'd been waiting for all year. Canola is one of the most profitable crops in the game, and I planted 2 full fields of it. Time to see if all that investment pays off. I walked out to the combine harvester, the one I just repaired with new seals and belt. I climbed into the cab, settled into the seat, and turned the key. The engine roared to life smoothly. All systems checked out, hydraulics working perfectly, header controls responding, no leaks anywhere. The repairs were holding up great. I drove the combine out to the first canola field, lowered the header to cutting height, and engaged the system. I started at the edge of the field and began moving forward slowly. The header cut through the canola stalks cleanly, pulling them into the threshing system. I could hear the combine working, the drum spinning, separating the tiny canola seeds from the stalks and chaff. The grain tank level indicator started rising steadily. Golden canola seeds were pouring into the tank. Everything was working perfectly. The combine moved smoothly through the field, cutting swath after swath. I was about halfway through the first field when disaster struck. Without any warning, the combine engine made a horrible, loud knocking sound. Then it started losing power rapidly, and thick white smoke poured out of the exhaust. I immediately disengaged the header and tried to shut down safely, but before I could, the engine made one final grinding clang and died completely. Total silence. Dead. My heart sank. I tried restarting the engine. Nothing. Not even a crank. Just clicking from the starter. I climbed out of the cab and popped open the engine compartment. More white smoke billowed out. The smell was terrible. Burning oil and overheated metal. I inspected the engine carefully, and what I found made my stomach drop. The engine had seized completely. One of the main internal components, probably a piston or a crankshaft, had failed catastrophically. This wasn't something I could fix with basic tools. This was a total engine failure. I stood there in the middle of the field looking at my broken combine and my half-harvested canola crop, feeling frustrated and defeated. Repairing this engine would cost nearly as much as the combine was worth, and I couldn't wait weeks for repairs. The canola was ready now. If I left it unharvested, it would start dropping seeds on the ground and I'd lose the entire crop. I needed a solution fast. I pulled out my phone and started searching for options. After making several calls, I contacted a machinery dealer who buys broken equipment. I explained the situation, combined with seized engine, mid-harvest, need to sell quickly. He drove out to the field, inspected the combine, and made me an offer. He can pay me $8,000. It wasn't much money, but it was better than nothing. I accepted his offer. He arranged to have the broken combine hauled away. But now I had an even bigger problem. I still needed a working combine to finish the harvest. I searched online listings frantically and found a local farmer who was selling an older combine harvester. It wasn't new by any means, probably 15 years old, but the listing said it was fully functional with a working header included. The price was $30,000, a significant chunk of money, but I had no choice. My canola crop was worth far more than that if I could harvest it. I drove my pickup truck to the farmer's property to inspect the combine. When I saw it, I was relieved. Yes, it was old. But I started the engine and it ran smoothly. No knocking, no smoke. Steady power. All the systems works good. Header lift, threshing drum, unloading auger, and everything worked. The header was attached and in decent condition. We agreed on the price. I paid him $30,000 and climbed into my new old combine. It felt strange driving a different machine, but the controls were similar enough. I drove it slowly back to my farm, getting used to how it handled. It was definitely more reliable feeling than my previous combine. The engine ran strong, the transmission shifted smoothly, and nothing leaked or rattled. Maybe this breakdown was a blessing in disguise, forcing me to upgrade to better equipment. I drove the combine out to the canola field where I had stopped mid-harvest. I positioned it right where my old combine had died and resumed cutting. The new combine worked beautifully. It moved through the canola efficiently, filling the grain tank quickly. I worked steadily for several hours, making pass after pass across the field. I drove to the edge of the field and positioned a trailer underneath the combine's unloading auger. I extended the auger and opened the valve. Golden canola seeds poured out in a steady stream, filling the trailer with a satisfying rushing sound. The grain looked perfect. Clean, uniform size, no debris. High quality canola. But here's where I made a different decision than last year. Instead of selling the canola immediately, I decided to store it in my farm's old silo. Why? because canola prices fluctuate based on season. Right now in autumn, immediately after harvest, prices are at their lowest because everyone is selling. But in winter, when supplies run low, prices rise significantly, sometimes 20 to 30% higher. If I store the canola now and sell it in winter, I can make substantially more profit. After 2 days of harvesting, both canola fields were complete. The silo was packed of canola seeds. I calculated the total yield. Both fields produced an enormous amount, about 31,000 of canola. This crop represents months of planning, investment, and work, and it's all safely stored, waiting for winter when prices peak. But the work wasn't over. After harvest, both fields were left covered in canola stubble, short, dry stalks sticking up everywhere. The soil was compacted from the combine's weight. Before I could plant the next crop, I needed to cultivate again. I hitched my trusty cultivator to the tractor and drove to the first field. Time to break up this ground one more time. I worked methodically across both fields, just like I did earlier in the year. The cultivator blades churned through the stubble, mixing it into the soil and loosening everything up. After several hours, both fields were cultivated and ready for planting again. Now here's the exciting part. I decided to buy my own seeder. I'm tired of renting equipment and paying rental fees every season. With the profits from silage sales, contract work, and the upcoming canola sale, I could finally afford to purchase my own. I found a good used seeder for sale. Older model but well maintained for $7,000. I bought it immediately. Now I own my seeder, and I'll never have to rent one again. I also bought more canola seeds. Canola was so profitable this year that I'm planting it again on both fields. I loaded the seeder with seeds and planted both fields carefully. Within a day, both fields were planted with canola for year 3. The cycle continues. With strong profits rolling in from silage sales, contract work, and the upcoming canola harvest, I started thinking about the future. The farm was doing well, but I wanted to diversify even more. I wanted income streams that weren't dependent on seasons or weather. That's when I decided to invest in greenhouses. Greenhouses are amazing for farming operations. They provide year-round income regardless of what's happening outside. While my field crops grow and wait for harvest, greenhouses produce vegetables constantly. No waiting for seasons, no worrying about frost or drought, just steady, consistent production and income. I researched greenhouse options online and found a supplier that sold complete greenhouse kits, everything included, ready to install. I decided to buy 2 medium-sized greenhouses. 2 units would give me good production capacity without overwhelming me with work. The total cost for both greenhouses, including delivery and installation materials, was $36,000. That's a significant investment, but I had the money from all my successful year 2 operations. Now came the fun part, choosing what to grow. I researched which vegetables provide the best profit margins and decided on a mix of crops. In the first greenhouse, I planted lettuce and cabbage, leafy greens that grow fast and sell well. In the second greenhouse, I planted tomatoes and garlic, higher value crops that take longer but bring in serious money. I also installed a pump well to water the greenhouses. Now I will always have water for them. Now, standing here at the end of year 2, it's crazy to see how far this farm has come. When the year started, I just had a basic setup. Now it's a fully functioning growing business. This year, I expanded my sheep flock from 5 to 15. Then I upgrade some of my equipment. I also produced high-quality silage using both pits for the first time. That upgrade alone made a big difference. On top of that, I ran a few contracts for other farmers and built 2 greenhouses that now bring steady income all year round. So if you want to see the continuation of this farm, leave a comment, "I want continue." Also, if you enjoy this video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos. This was Fizbee. See you next time.